So I'm 26 and I get a phone call. Hello? It's the education department. Oh, hi, how are you? We have a job for you. Okay. Where is it? In Ceduna. Ceduna. Where is that? I have no idea at this stage what they're talking about. It's on the Eyre Peninsula. We need to know today. Now, back then, if you didn't give an answer immediately, you were put to the bottom of the line. I said, listen, can you give me a few days? I mean, I have a job. I have to discuss with my boss what might the consequences be and how soon I can leave. Okay, I'll give you till Monday. It's Friday. So I had to call my brother and I had to say, listen, I've been offered this job and I don't know what to do. Do you mind me leaving at short notice and going off and starting this teaching job? And graciously he said yes. So there I was, 1 minute working in a city of 1 million people, and I was on a small plane flying out to a town of then about 3,000. I got met on the tarmac by what was an old World War II army jeep, and I got to meet a gentleman called Phil, and so my introduction was driving in the passenger seat of a World War II American Army jeep, driving to the local hotspots, of which of course there weren't almost any. I got taken to the town split in two, so there's, why is it always bugs when I do this? There is a place called Thevenard, which is basically a fishing port, and the town itself in Ceduna is where the administrative and centre of it is. It's on a large bay, and yeah, it's extremely remote. The only entertainment, the only places in town you could go were the football club, the sailing club, and yeah, that was about it. They were the only entertainment places. It had a supermarket and shops, but nothing very elaborate, shall we say. So I got taken to the sailing club, and I got told, well, this is where you'll come and have your meals if you want to go out. This is where we all meet. I said, okay, great. He said, this is your area, and that is the area for other people. That's the front bar. We don't go in there. I thought, well, that's curious. And then we drove around and we saw the school, and then we went along the railway tracks. And again, we're going back in time here. This is the mid-90s. And he said, you live over here, and Aboriginal people live over the railway line in this community over here. And again, I was like, okay, I'm starting to get a clearer picture here. Maybe the things I'd learned about apartheid and my visit to South Africa were still existing here in Australia. And maybe the laws had been repealed, but the reality on the ground was there was not a great coming together at that time in the community. I found out, of course, that the front bar was where Aboriginal people went to drink, and we went to the saloon, the family bar. So anyway, I got dropped off at my elaborate accommodations, and I felt completely like a fish out of water. I had no idea how I'd got myself in this position. I was terrified. The only friend I had in that first week were two Russian blues, two cats, who met me the first night and progressively got friendlier and friendlier until one night they actually wanted to not go back to their owners, and they wanted to sleep inside my house. And when I woke up the next morning, I found out exactly why they were so friendly. There were at least a dozen or more rat carcasses on the floor of my apartment. So they were on a mission. They're on a mission to clean out the apartment. I was there on a 6-month appointment to teach science, and my first teaching day was an absolute nightmare. I remember preparing extremely well for this lesson, more than I would have ever again in my life, I'd say, to make sure everything was perfect. And no sooner had I walked in the room and the kids started to question me, and they started to realise that I had no idea what I was doing, and I'd never done this before, and they just rode roughshod all over me. It got to the point where they said, "We're not listening to you, we don't care what you say, and we are going to go and call our parents, we're going to get you removed from the school." This was the first lesson they really took me to task, and I was hopeless because I didn't know how to react. I wanted everything to be perfect, of course, that first day. So I didn't want to cause a ruckus, I didn't want to get angry, I didn't want to lay down the law or anything. And they knew because kids are stupid. So two of the children left and came back a short time later with the class in absolute chaos, of course, and the deputy principal at the time, Phil, was with them, and I thought, oh good, well this will be a very short career. And he walked in that room, and I don't think I've ever seen anyone lay down the law like that man did to that class. It was amazing. You could have heard a pin drop by the time he'd finished. And from that day on, I never had a problem. Teaching became just the norm for me. But had that day gone differently, and had I not had that support, I think my career would have been a very different story. And as I said, Phil turned out to be a really close friend and associate, because he also had similar tastes in music, and he was in a band at the time, and I'd been in bands, so we had a lot in common, and that friendship grew over time, even to the point where he wanted me to do he ran a radio station at the airport, which used to broadcast to the town, and because of my background in the independent music where I've been working, he asked me to do a midnight 2 a.m. show to let the country folk hear some independent music from the city. And so that's what I did, and had a lot of fun with that. And as the weeks went on, I certainly started to meet, I think there were three other people who joined me at the school, and although we were pining at that age to get back to the city, we all had managed to have a really good time together as friends, and make the best of the situation that we were in. Anyway, at the end of 6 months, I was finished my contract teaching science, and I must have done something they liked, because they said, would you like to come back as the school AERT for another year? I said me as an AERT, which means an Aboriginal Education Resource Teacher. The white guy. I said yes, I would, but I don't know how much in the way of resources I have. And thankfully, they said, no problems, we've got 2 AEWs, and they are Aboriginal education workers, and their job is basically to liaise between the community and the school and the kids that come to the school. And they will nursemaid you through this period where you don't know what you're doing. So I was extremely lucky, and the 2 AEWs I had in Michael and Lizzie were unbelievable people who just made me feel welcome, and were just incredible at their job. Michael was a champion. He was a gentle giant, you might call him. He was an amazing footballer and a very stoic, quiet man, but his sense of humour was wicked. And Lizzie, well, Lizzie was a worrywart who reminded me just so much of my mother, and I called her my mother away from home. So I had these 2 incredible people working with me, and we managed to do a lot of great things, not just by making the school feel more inclusive with its Aboriginal clientele, but also we brought the community into the school. I can remember we got in the band Coloured Stone from the Kaniba community, Kaniba mission, that was outside of the town, and I also took the kids to WOMAD in Adelaide, WOMADelaide, which was a way for them to not just enjoy world music, but also we got to meet Yofi Yindi, again through my brother's connections and a few phone calls. We got to catch up and meet with the great man himself, who wrote a song that you should look up called Treaty. And although I'm not going to be telling you in this video about the history of Aboriginal people in this country, that's not for me to do. That's something that you can look up yourself and hopefully learn from the actual people who need to tell that story. It certainly isn't me, but I did manage to go with the kids to this, which is from a World Indigenous Conference in Wollongong, and I, to my shock, found that all you need to do is insert the Indigenous people of your country, and the story is very much the same, because colonisation has a way of treating people that follows the same template. So we managed to push Aboriginal studies into the curriculum and get some progress in the year I was there that felt amazing. And we also had 3 people who were running the district in Larry, Kathleen and Andy, who just were like bulls in a china shop. They would not allow anything to stop our agenda trying to make the school a better and happier place. The restrictions weren't allowed to happen. They would make phone calls. They would make things happen that I could never do by myself, or neither could my other AEWs. And it was just one of the most magic experiences of my life. In fact, so much so that it literally changed who I was. It literally put me in touch with the person who I guess I knew was there, but I didn't grow up in that environment. You got to understand that Aboriginal people often are treated as second-class citizens in this country, and I often see a lot of, what's the term, man speak, or in this case it's white speak, where people come in and tell Aboriginal people all sorts of things, and Aboriginal people are not going to be the ones that are usually the most verbally forward to come forward and state their opinions all the time. They don't just talk like idiot here talks now all the time. So in fact, I noticed as time went on that there were a lot of gestures, and that the non-verbal part of Aboriginal culture is extremely important, and they can carry on agreements and conversations with people at the table without having to speak. And this, I'm not going to say it's introverted, but this quieter way of listening instead of talking was a revelation to me, and something that fitted much more closely with who I was as a person. So much so that, you know, when I got home, I was a different person when I visited Adelaide from that moment on, and through my whole life. I've just retreated from the world I grew up in as a kid, where, you know, as good Irish, Catholic, Scottish descendants, we would talk loudly and we would talk aggressively and we would try and hold court with people. And this put me in touch with something that I felt so much more comfortable with. People, I used to look down upon people who would not engage in the main conversation when we would have family gatherings, who would sit back and quietly talk to each other, or not engage in the backwards and forwards. I used to think those people were less people. They were more timid people. They were not able to carry on a conversation like we would. And then I was with that group. I then started to understand that, you know, he who shouts loudest isn't always right. It's you've got to use your ears as well. And this is what Aboriginal people taught me. They also taught me about holistic learning, which is not, these days it gets contaminated into this bullshit of crystals, or I don't know, some kind of new age mamby-pamby things. But that has nothing to do with what Aboriginal people were doing when they educated their children. And, you know, holistic means that instead of compartmentalizing everything like we do, where we have a chemistry class, an English class, an ancient history class, and we treat them all separately, Aboriginal people see it all as being tied together. Their stories and their art reflect the spiritual side of things. They also demonstrate the environment they live in, and they also demonstrate the laws that they live under. But it's all done in that holistic way, where it's not taught separately. And I could see a lot of benefits in that in our education system as well, if we were trying to not make things so polarized and different. I've got an example. Excuse me for a minute. Oh, got an example here. This was painted by an Aboriginal elder in the Kinniba, in the Kinniba township, for me. And again, this is a spiritual story. It's called Budgerigar Dreaming. Now I don't know, and I don't think I was told the actual spiritual meaning behind this, but to us it just looks like a bunch of squiggly lines. But if you know what it represents, you start to understand a little bit more about this way of learning, and that these are trees, and these are budgerigars, and the babies are inside the trees, and the snakes are outside here, which you can probably tell they're snakes, are out here hunting. and the parents are protecting the children by keeping them inside the nest. Just one I had on hand. But if you read any dreaming story, you're going to find there is a whole lot more than just a religious story to it. One of the biggest things that dawned on me was that my way of life, my bubble that I live in, is not only not the only way, but maybe not the best way. Maybe there are other ways that are equally good. And of course, this was something that was unique for me. It was the first time that I felt that I had a home that was not my little hometown, that was not my comfortable way of existence. I felt at home in another culture. And that would expand a lot as time went on, but right now, that was a really unique experience for me. So after the year had finished, I had to decide what I was going to do next. I'd been in Ceduna for a year and a half, and I had 3 options that I was looking at. One was to stay on and continue in the job I was doing. I was also offered a vice principalship at Caniba, which was again further away and out in the bush than where I was living. This had the option of what I will call the golden ticket. So if I was willing to do a year out in Caniba, then I would be given an automatic right of return. Now this is what everybody was dreaming of back then. Teachers were always contract until they were offered a permanent position. And this would have meant that had I done the year, I could go back to my city, back to Adelaide, and I could have a permanent job. Permanent job means that you don't have to stay in one place. They can move you around from school to school, but you have to be employed at some point at your current rate of pay and etc., as a permanent teacher. This is what everyone dreamed of. I didn't. I saw this as the sword of Damocles hanging over my head. This was the very thing that I was trying to avoid, because I knew it's not a free ticket in the sense that you can just do whatever you want. From that moment on, the education department sets out the rules and how you can apply and how you can move around and what you can do. And it doesn't last forever. If I wanted to take off and do something in my life, then you just can't do that. You've got to follow the rules. And it was so tempting. It was such a hard choice to take the risk to do something else, but I did. I ended up applying for another AERT position, this one as in charge of an Aboriginal team, and it was closer to the city, closer to Adelaide, about 3 hours from Adelaide, and I decided to apply for that job, and in the end I won that job. And so I was leaving my wonderful community to head off into the unknown again and start as a head of an Aboriginal team at another school. So I'd arrived on the banks of the Great Murray River, Australia's longest river, stretching for a couple of thousand miles. And this particular section was surrounded by 3 large towns of Barmera, Berry and Loxton, all each around the same size as the town I just left. And I was very much looking forward to continuing the work that I'd done. But it wasn't very long after I arrived that I noticed that there was something quite not right about the position. I found that people were asking strange questions. I found that people were asking questions about the AEWs that I was working with at the school, and I thought they were a bit weird. and it took me a while to suss out what was going on. It seemed that I'd walked into somewhat of a family or a community dispute between different factions and families within the community that I had no idea of. I was entering into when I started the work. The problem was that there was a move to try and remove one of the AEWs, and the other AEW who worked was also representing another side of this argument, and they were both working with me. To make matters worse, one of the families had members who were living just across the road from the school that I worked at, and they were had children at the school, as did both the AEWs also had family members at the school, and another group, another faction representing the other AEW had friends who were running the district and who were members of other schools, and I was landed a little bit a poison chalice, if you like. I actually found out later that I was not supposed to get this job, and that someone from inside the school faculty was supposed to get the job, and they were under the understanding that they were going to remove this AEW, and I gummed up the works. I didn't know that at the time. However, I pretty quickly made the decision that I wasn't going to play favourites, that I was going to walk straight down the middle, and I knew, as was a golden rule, I had to support my AEWs. They were my contact with the community. So it made it stressful and awkward almost from the get-go. Each AEW would question the other's decision making, and each felt that there were favours being given to the other side. And I just said, there'll be none of that. I'm going to do things that are in the best interests of the school and the best interests of the students. The only problem with that is that sticking down the middle means you get fired out from both sides. But that was the conditions that I found myself working under, and we still did a lot of things. The role that I took wasn't just putting on events, which we did in the school. We put on, I remember getting in Red Ochre restaurant from Adelaide and having an Aboriginal meals celebration at the school. We put on Aboriginal displays. We did all the cultural work, but the job was also supporting students inside the school. I had to go from classroom to classroom on a one-to-one basis with the AEWs, helping kids out within the class so that they felt they could be inclusive with the class. I also had to prepare materials. In this school, we actually started, instead of just writing Aboriginal studies lessons, we went about including an inclusive curriculum where each subject would have to teach each term an Aboriginal lesson relating to their particular area of specialty, whether it be maths or chemistry or English or whatever. We also had to visit the parents. That was part of the job description as well. So I would often visit people in the towns or go out to the mission and visit families out there. We would check on their attendance and we would talk about their behaviour. I don't think the behaviour and the attendance was really part of my job, but you're included with the AEWs when you go out there, and that's part of what you do. I also managed to write some curriculum materials for the state as well, which was taught or handed out to be instructed into the curriculum throughout the state. So it was a really busy time. Oh, and on top of that, there was also a teaching component that you had to do as well, just normal classroom teaching. So there was a lot on my plate. But after several years, I felt very burnt out. And at the end of it, I felt like I deserved a break. So at that stage, as I was turning 30, most people were, if they couldn't afford a house or to put a deposit down and get a mortgage, they were at least having a family. So of course, that's what I did. Absolutely not. I decided that after America and in my 20s, it was time for me to do another long trip, and the money I'd saved up, I decided I was going to spend on going to Africa. Why Africa? I was trying to think of this the other day, and I think probably there were two reasons. One was I didn't see myself being able to go and spend a month in Africa when I was my age now. When I was older, when I was retired, I saw no opportunity that was going to happen. So I figured if I was going to do Africa, I should do it now. The second reason was that apartheid was ending in South Africa, and I was lucky enough to be there in the last week before Mandela took over government, and I got to experience the conditions that people had to live under that white supremacy that was going on under apartheid. You know, there was no way now that I'd be going to see the mountain gorillas or canoeing up the Okavango Delta in Botswana. It was something you needed to do when you were able to get out and get about. Europe was something you could do when you were in your 40s or your 50s or your 60s or whenever. But Africa definitely seemed like something I needed to do right now. And of course, I've been away now for 4.5, 5 years from the city, from home, and I was desperate to get back, and that's where we're going to go next. We're going to head back, and I had a few ideas about what I'd like to do next, and that will be what we'll talk about in my story in my 30s. So until then, take care and have fun.